welcome back to the workshop. All about electrics today. We're back on the D7 Bantam. We're going to construct a wiring harness and fit it and hopefully get everything to work. We're working with fairly simple systems. It's just lighting and the horn. The ignition side of things was taken care of when I fitted the Bones CDI. And there is a video, if you go back in my previous videos, all about fitting the CDI. I know some of you guys are pretty proficient at doing your own wiring, but if wiring isn't your thing, I'm hoping that this video will, give you a few tips and maybe spur you on to have a go yourself. Anyway, let's get on and play with electricity. Right, let's have a look at some of the new components for the electrical system. We've got our new main lighting switch of the Y-Pack variety. Reproduction, of course, because they don't make the original Y-Pack ones anymore. But it certainly looks okay, and it feels very much like the original Y-Pack one, which is quite flimsy, but it's the right kind of switch, so there we go. We've also got a new horn and dip switch. This is the Lucas type. It's again a reproduction, but it looks reasonable quality. And I've seen these on Bantams, they look quite good. So we've got our beep beep. I managed to recover the old Y-Pack socket that came with the bike. The new ones, quite expensive. Well, not that expensive, they're about £20, which is quite a lot of money for a bit of plastic, really. But apparently they don't fit very well. You have to start filing the switch pins, which is not ideal. So I thought, well, I'll have a go at recovering the original one. And it's had a little bit of a bath in some citric acid, which got all the verdigris off because it was absolutely bright green. And you can see that is like new. So that worked very well. And desoldered all the old wires and links that was on it. So we can reuse that, which is good news. I've con-checked it and it's fine. All the connectors have continuity, so that's good news. And then I made up some battery leads. We're using a modern style fuse, just like Dale Swager uses, because if you get stranded or you break down for a blown fuse, which you shouldn't do really, but anyway, you're much more likely to find that kind of fuse in a service station than you are the old glass type. So that's why I've used that. And then we've got our new battery as well. I don't think I've shown you this. Again, it's the type that Dale uses, so must be good, purely on that recommendation. The Motorbat, quite well known brand. Look at that, Jacksonville, Florida. My wife used to live there when she was a child. So it all comes around, doesn't it? There we go, and that's the part number there. So we've got our new battery, which is good news. We'll be able to have a parking light and a horn. And speaking of a horn, I didn't buy one because in my infinite wisdom, I thought, well, I've got a horn in my bits box. I know I've got a spare horn, but guess what? Can you see? Can you see the obvious mistake? 6 volt. So it's no good. It'll have to go back in the parts box for another day, and I'll have to get a 12 volt universal horn, which we will conceal somewhere on the machine. Anyway, that's a few of the new components that we're going to be using. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention. I've got a pilot bulb holder as well, so that we can have a parking light, because that was missing. Anyway, let's have a look at making up a wiring loom. Well, there's our dip switch and horn push fitted to the handlebar, and it looks quite good, I think. I quite like it. One word of caution, the little plastic module inside that is the actual switch is free to move inside the metal case. So if you don't get it centralized before you tighten up the screws, you can actually impede the movement of the dip switch arm, and it can feel as though it wants to break off. So make sure you get that nice and central, and that your dip switch arm is nice and free when you nip up these screws, because you wouldn't want to break your brand new switch. Quite like it. I like the little chrome horn push, and it looks exactly like the illustration in a book that I have called The Book of the BSA Bantam by W.C. Haycraft. And Haycraft was a motorcycle journalist in Britain, I think, from the pre-war years probably through to the 70s, I would think, the early 70s. And he wrote a lot of guidebooks for different motorcycles. He even wrote some for Japanese bikes as well, so there you go. He must have been a bit of a progressive, eh? But yeah, he wrote these guidebooks for people that didn't have the owner's manual, and they're very good. And I've got the BSA Bantam one, and I'm waffling, I know, but yeah, the illustration of the controllers looks exactly like that, so I'm very pleased. Anyway, let's have a look at the wiring that came with it, because I found it to be a bit unusual. So it is a Lucas switch. Let me just move the camera slightly so that you can see the wiring. It's a Lucas switch, and having worked on lots of old British cars, I was expecting blue and white to be main beam, because that's what it is on Lucas wiring looms on British cars. But not so. Blue and white is in fact the wiper for the dip switch, so it's the central connection for the dip switch. And then we have blue, which is the main beam. We have brown, which is the dip beam, and then we've got red and black, which is the horn. So not what I was expecting to find, but I'm certainly not going to start desoldering wires just to suit my particular taste. They'll do as they are. I've con-checked them, and everything seems to work, so we can move on. Right over at the bench, and I've assembled some weapons of war ready to get into making this wiring loom, or wiring harness if you prefer. And we've got our soldering iron, solder, multimeter, and various tools that I think you've seen. If you've watched my previous video thinking about wiring, you've seen most of those tools before, and if you haven't, then now would be a good time to go back and watch it and acquaint yourself with the various tools that I use. You can see that there's some wire on the bench already. I've selected the colours that I want to use for my main wiring harness, and I've just loosely taped them together, and I've cut them to a length which is convenient, so it extends from just in front of the headlamp shell to just beyond the seat area of the bike where the battery lives. So we've got plenty to play with. We can mess around and you know, get our routing correct and not have to worry about running out of wire. Now this is how I do it, and I think it's best practice, but obviously, you know, you'll find your own way. But when I make a wiring harness, the thing that is uppermost in my mind is that I'm building a component to fit to the machine. You see them quite often, home wiring jobs, where it becomes an integral part of the bike because people have threaded wires through holes, they put plugs on the end, and then the plugs won't come through the holes. And you know, you try to take a bike apart and all of a sudden, you know, bits won't come off because there's wires sort of locking them in place. I would try to avoid that if you can. Try to make a component on the bench that you can then fit to the bike, and by component, that is your wiring harness, and that's what we're gonna do with this one. Excuse me. Now this is going to be quite a simple system because, as you know, I fitted the Bones CDI system, and that takes care of all of the ignition and makes the sort of ignition and lighting side of things completely separate. So all we are doing is building a wiring harness for lighting and a horn. So that's why we don't have an awful lot of wires. And what we have is, we have a red, which is going to be our main feed up to the main lighting switch, so that's going to provide the power. We've got a white, which is going to be our main earth, and that's going to earth everything that's in the headlamp shell back to the main earth on the bike and the battery. And then we have a black cable, and that's the tail light. We have a blue cable, and that is going to connect the horn push to the horn, obviously, and then we've got a brown cable, and that is going to be the feed back from the main lighting switch, and that will control, well, that will provide the feed for the horn and the stoplight, and that is basically everything on our bike that we need to power. All the other wiring, everything else, will be in the headlamp shell. So what we'll do soon is we'll go over to the bike and we'll have a look at where everything goes, where the wires are going to go, and what we need to connect up. Right, we're peering into the headlamp shell. This is where most of the work is going to happen, and most of the features are going to be. So you can see already the speedometer there and the speedometer lamp. So there's the male Lucar connection for the speedometer lamp. You can see the redundant ignition switch here, which we're not using because we're using the bone system. So that is just there for shop decoration, if you like. Here's the cables coming down from the dip switch, which we've already looked at. And here's the back of the headlamp with the pilot or parking lamp bulb and cables, and then our headlamp cables, which will be connected up. So we're going to have quite a few connectors in here, and we need to sort of working on that principle that the wiring harness should be a component that can be removed. We don't want to hardwire anything in. Everything needs to be breakable. So you need to figure out where your brakes are going to go. For example, I have seen wiring harnesses where things like the pilot bulb holder actually comes with the harness. Quite a few British harnesses come like that. You buy a new harness and the pilot bulb holder is soldered in. I'm not planning on doing that. I'm going to put a brake because it came supplied with these bullet connectors anyway. So that will add to the sort of mass of connectors that are in there. But there's plenty of room, and it will do us a favour because it will make it easier for the wiring harness to come in and out as we feel like it. This is where the lighting switch will go, which we've already seen that earlier on in the video, so that will be in there. There's the socket on the back, and we're going to be doing some soldering on the bench to that when we assemble the wiring harness. Let's now go to the rear end of the bike and have a look at what's going to be going on there. So here we are at the other business end as far as wiring is concerned, in the battery compartment, and there's the battery shelf there, and our battery will fit in there somewhere like that with the rubber strap to retain it. And then we've already got some wires in here, which I think you've probably seen on previous videos. I'm not entirely sure. I think we talked about them. So we've got our small harness coming from the tail lamp with our separate earth lead, because we don't rely on frame earths. Keep the gremlins at bay if we possibly can. We've got our black lead from the tail lamp, and we've got our brown lead, which is running down to the stop switch. And so, unsurprisingly, that's the stop lamp wiring. And following the ethos of everything being a component that can be disconnected, we can disconnect these cables. We can take the mudguard and the rear lamp off as one assembly without disturbing anything wiring-wise forward of this point. So we've got our planned brakes here. Nothing by accident. We've planned to put the brakes here for just that reason. We do have a frame earth down here because our engine relies on a frame earth. So we've got a good clean earthing point there, and that's wired in to our main earthing point, which is going to be this connector here. We'll have the battery coming in, and we'll have the white lead in the forward wiring harness going into here as well. So we've got good dependable earthing on our bike, and hopefully we won't have any dim lamps or anything like that. We've got this lead here, which is the positive lead from the regulator rectifier, and we're going to have a similar connector to this where the battery will connect in, and the positive lead from the forward wiring harness will connect in. And again, everything can be disconnected and removed individually. The black lead here going to our frame earth is the negative lead from the regulator rectifier, and that will feed directly into our main earthing point here. That's pretty much it really for wiring in this area. The horn will go in here somewhere when it arrives. As you remember, I only had a 6-volt horn, and that's no good to us. So once we get the new horn, we'll figure out where that's going to go, and we'll leave the leads for the horn quite long so that we can test and adjust as and when. Right, we'll go up to the bench and we'll start putting together our wiring harness. So you may recall my rather rudimentary wiring diagram, but it's as good as it needs to be. We're focused on the main lighting switch here, and this is a view of the rear of the socket like this, and as you can see I've been doing something. So we need to strap 8 and 9, and I decided that I would use green on this side of the switch. We need to strap 7, 4 and 3, and I decided that I would use yellow on this side of the switch. So that's what I've done. So we've got 8 and 9 strapped there. We've got 7 going to 4, 4 and 3 are strapped. So that's all our links done. We now need to introduce our other cables. We've got our red feed coming from our wiring harness, which needs to go to either 8 or 9. It'll probably go on to 9 because there's going to be 2 cables in each of these terminals, one being this green strap that you can see, and then we'll have our red cable coming in from the harness, and we'll have the brown going back into the harness to feed the horn and the stoplight. Now you might sort of say, well, what's the point in doing that? Why have this cable coming all the way up here that's feeding something, you know, at the battery compartment? Well, that's just convention really. When you look at wiring harnesses, they generally feed from one point. So rather than have, you know, leads flying around in the battery compartment, we're going to feed everything from the lighting switch, or pretty much everything from the lighting switch. On the other side of the switch, we've got the dip switch going on to number 5. We've got our tail lamp and speedo lamp, which will be a fly lead with a bullet connector on, coming from terminal 3 or 4, probably terminal 3. Sounds like an airport, doesn't it? Terminal 3. And then at number 2 here, we'll have another fly lead coming off for our pilot light. And that is pretty much it. And of course, from our wiring loom, we'll have a main earth in the headlamp shell that all our services can earth to. So our pilot light can earth to it, our headlamp can earth to it, and also our speedometer lamp, because I don't think we're going to rely on the connection between the metal of the speedometer and the headlamp shell. We're going to put a separate earth lead in. So that's the next job. Get these wires all connected up to this socket, and then we'll do a bit of soldering. I'm ready to do some soldering, and first 2 cables I'm going to connect are the red feed from the wiring harness and the brown cable which takes the feed back down to the horn and the stoplight, and they're on terminals 8 and 9, and we've also got our green link wire sharing these 2 terminals. So you just got to be a little bit careful that all the wires, you know, go into the terminals, nothing's hanging out, you haven't got any stray strands, and that you don't cut them over long so that they stick out and potentially cause a short. You can open these eyelets up a little bit with a scriber or something similar, but you've got to be careful because it'd be easy to go too far and break them, and then your socket would be useless. So we're going to do that. We're going to solder these 2 to start with. You can see I've got some tools just holding stuff down so nothing moves. It's much easier not to go for a moving target, and I'm just going to tin the iron. Just get plenty of solder on there to wet it, and then just give it a shake off. And that's the iron nicely tinned, and then we'll do some soldering. And this iron that I'm using, I'm trying not to get my head in the way. I've had it a long time. It's an old friend, and it's a good make, an Antex. You just make sure you get a good even flow of solder. There we go, nice bright shiny joint. We don't want any dry joints. So there's one done. Let's get on this one. And the whole idea with soldering is to heat the joint, not the solder. There we go. Two nice shiny joints. Right, let's get some more wires connected and do a bit more. Okay, we've soldered in our links now from 7, 4 and 3. We've soldered in our tail light feed from 4. We're just about to solder in the fly lead from 3, which is going to feed our speedometer light. I've done that in black as well to match the tail light so that we know that they're on the same circuit. And let's just do that one. And then we've got to put a fly lead in from 5, which will feed our dip switch, and another one from 2, which will feed our parking light or pilot light if you prefer. And that's our switch done. So we're nearly there. You just got to take your time, be careful, and try not to overheat the plastic or overheat the terminals, which will then obviously overheat the plastic. So trying to keep my head out of the way. Make sure we get a good shiny joint. Oh, melted the insulation a little bit on the wire. Let's see if we can coax that back into position. Not really an issue, but I just like things nice and tidy, really. Yeah, that'll be fine. Okay, so I'll make up another fly lead to come off here, and that will be a blue. I think we'll use blue, and then we've got one to come off the dip switch, and that'll be us. Okay, we're all good. We've got all our wires on our socket. We've got a red, which is going to be the fly lead for the dip switch. We've got a blue, which is a fly lead for the pilot lamp. I can't remember. We've got our horn cable, we've got our main earth, and that is it. That's all we need. So we can start putting some bullets on the end of these fly leads. I'm just going to figure out how long they need to be. So we'll go over to the bike and we'll sort of mock up the position, figure out how long to leave these, because we don't want too much wire in the headlamp shell, but at the same time we don't want guitar strings. But I don't think there's any danger of that, because we've got plenty of wire on our pilot lamp, and certainly plenty on our dip switch. In fact, we'll probably have to remove some from the dip switch and shorten them down a little bit, but we will see. Okay, I'm bound to get in the way, so I do apologise in advance. So here's our socket. It's going to sit up there somewhere like this. We've got our blue cable here, which is going to go to the pilot light. So we'll just take a little bit off that. Just enough to give us room to get a bullet on the end and get the connector in. This is going to our dip switch. Look how much wire we've got on our dip switch. Absolutely tons. So we'll do the same. We'll just shorten it down to a sort of reasonable length. And then we've just got our... oops, sorry. Let me just put you back. I'm kicking you. Okay, we've just got the one more to do, and that is our speedometer light. Just leave ourselves sort of a healthy loop about there. And that will have a Lucar connector, a female Lucar connector. So there we go, back to the bench. Okay, we've got bullets, so one for our dip switch, one for our pilot light, we've got one for the horn, one for the main earth, and then we're just going to do the Lucar type connector for our speedometer light. So let's get that done. Got one of these little terminal kits. They're not terribly expensive, and they come with all the bits and pieces, and the ratchet pliers for fitting them. So let's get that done. Make sure you can see. That would be useful, wouldn't it? There we go. Get it into focus. Done. And we have our little bit of plastic that a little spare strand got away there. Let's just get rid of that. There we go. And our little plastic thing that comes over it. Job jobbed. So we can go on and do some testing and make sure that everything's working as advertised, and then we can think about where it's going to go on the bike and wrapping our harness. Right, let's do some testing. Got the multimeter, and we'll check it on continuity or diode test, and we get a tone, so we know that's working. Here's our switch, so we're going to put it to the pilot position, and we should have let's put the red meter connection on the main feed to simulate the battery. We should have a tail light on the black, which we have. We should have a pilot light on the blue fly lead, which we do have. We should have a speedometer light, which is good, but we should not have any power on the dip switch because we shouldn't have headlights, and we don't. So that's working as advertised. I'm not going to con-check the horn or the main earth because they're just wires running through the wiring harness, and we know they work anyway. So I'm not going to bother with those. So let's put the switch to lights, and again we'll simulate the battery with where's the red cable? Where is it? There it is. We'll put the red meter lead to the feed on the wiring loom to simulate the battery, as I just said. And now then we should have tail lights on the black, which we do have. We should have a speedometer light. We do. And we should have a feed on the dip switch, which we do, but we should not have a pilot light, which we don't. So success so far. It's a simple wiring loom, but it is, you know, it makes sense just to test things before you get it wrapped and realize that you've got a broken wire or you've done something wrong. So at least we know that everything's working as it should with our light switch and our connections. So get the switch installed in the bike, and then we can think about getting the wiring loom into position and then getting it wrapped so that we can fit it. I think we're just about on the home straight now with this wiring job. I've just temporarily secured the harness in the position that it will be in. You can see there's the regulator rectifier there, and some wiring from the CDI stop switch. But this is where it will run. I'm using these John Bull rubber cable ties. The advantages of these is that they were available in the period, so they look right. They're easy to install. You can put them on and take them off again, unlike plastic cable ties where you really have to cut them. You don't get that razor blade when you cut a cable tie, because you don't have to cut them, and they just sort of loop over, and this is what they look like. The disadvantages of these is that you have to get the right size, because they don't really have a size range like a cable tie. And I use cable ties on other things, but on this bike I just decided to use these. Yeah, you have to get the right length, otherwise they either hang slack or they're like a guitar string. But they're quite good if you get the right ones. Anyway, we've talked about those, haven't we? Let's go down to the battery box and have a look in there, and we'll talk about what we need to do to just get this job finished off. So excuse while I lower you down and then bring you around. Just move it back a bit as well. Right, here we go. We're in the battery box, and as you can see, the horn arrived. So I've just let's get this wiring out of the way. I've just fitted it in here. There's a bolt here at the bottom, sorry, a stud that holds the lower mount of the battery tray. So it's nicely tucked out of the way. So happy with that. So what I need to do now is just figure out how far down the wiring harness I want my wrap to come, and then how much longer I'm going to need on my free ends to go to the various connectors and services that they're going to go to. So I'm just going to do that now. I also need another cable coming off the brown feed for the stop switch to feed the horn. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to splice a cable in, which will be hidden inside the wiring harness, and that will come off the brown cable, and with the blue cable, which is the other wire for the horn, we'll have a branch coming off the wiring harness, for a taped branch for the horn. And that's all going to get done on the bench once I've figured out the lengths, and we've clipped all the wires to the right length. So I'll get on and do that, and then we'll go over to the bench and get finished up. Back on the bench then, and we've got our extra feed soldered and heat shrunk for our horn. We've got our horn branch taped, just roughly taped off so we know where it is. We've taped off where the end of our wrap is going to be, so we know that the wrap will come to here, the horn branch will come off here, and will continue to be wrapped down to just to leave enough to connect up the horn at the end with the two spade connectors, the Lucar type spade connectors. We appear to be doing that strange pulsing with the camera focus. I don't know what that's all about, but hopefully it stops. I do apologise. And then if you look at the other end here, when I say a branch, that's what I mean. Just get it into focus. So there is a branch coming off for the earth, and that is the horn switch cable. So when we wrap the cable loop, it will look like this all the way along, and then where the horn branch is at the other end, we'll have something like this, which looks reasonably neat, makes a good job of it. So I'm going to get all the terminals. Each of these cables here will get a bullet, and then these two will get a Lucar spade connector, and then once that's done, we can wrap our cable harness and fit it to the bike. There we go. All of our various terminals fitted, soldered where necessary, crimped with the ratchet pliers in the case of the horn wiring. We're ready to go. We're ready to put some wiring loom wrap on. What we're going to use, this stuff. I don't know how you say it. Tesa tape. That's what we're going to use. This is the nearest thing I could find to the stuff that I got taught how to use, which is like a cloth binding. I can't find the cloth binding anywhere. You can buy wiring harnesses that have got the cloth binding on, but if somebody knows where to buy the original wiring harness cloth binding from, let me know, because I've tried and I can't find it. But this comes pretty near. It looks fairly reasonable. It's kind of self-amalgamating or self-vulcanizing. It does stick to itself rather well, so that's good. I think modern cars use this, modern vehicles use this. So this is what we're going to use. Anyway, enough about the tape, let's get on and do it. The first thing I'm going to do is take this branch for the horn, so we'll get that done. Tell you what, the one criticism I've got of this stuff is it's quite staticky, if that's a word. We're going to use it. That is a word now. It wants to pick up every bit of dust and sort of bit off your workbench, so you have to be careful with it. Put it down somewhere clean. So I don't know how much of this you'll see. Let me just give you a view. I'm just going to tape up to the junction, up to the branch. Go about 50-50 with your folds or with your crossovers. Right, we're right up to the junction now, so I'm going to tape around the horn branch, and I'm going to start going down the horn cable. Okay, and I'm going to get some more of the tape. And I'm going to start again behind the branch. I'm going to go over the branch, and then I'm going to, sorry, I'm out of focus. I'm going to continue on to the main wiring harness. There we go. Just finish off there. As you can see, we've got a reasonable looking branch. Now I'm just going to reinforce it a little bit. There we go. Job done. That's our branch. And you can't see any wires. Everything's taped. It looks good. So I'm going to continue along the rest of the harness now with that sort of 50-50 overlap, and we'll see where we get to. And keep it reasonably taut as I'm taping, because we don't want sort of loops sticking up, but as long as you keep it reasonably taut, you'll get a good result. So let's get that done. So here's our finished result, our wiring harness. We've got our branches either end. It's not a particularly complicated harness. We don't have many circuits on this bike. In fact, all this harness is for is lights and a horn, but you just add the circuits as you need them. More modern machinery will have indicators and things like that. Warning lamps, you just add them as you need them. You figure out where your wires have to go. You build a loosely taped harness. You figure out where your branches need to be, and you tape your branches, and then you take it all off. You bring it over to the bench, you finish it off, and you end up with a component like this that you can fit to the bike. It isn't intertwined in anything. It doesn't prevent anything else from being maintained. And in the event that something goes wrong with it, you can take it off, you can put it on the bench, and you can work out what needs to be done to fix it. So all that remains now is to go back over to the bike and fit it. Okay, time to install. I don't know how much you're going to be able to see because of my hands getting in the way. I've got the lighting, I think, just about sorted. I've got a strip light lashed to the camera tripod, so hopefully you can see. Well, let's just see if we can get you a slightly better view than what you've got. That's a little bit better, isn't it? Bit of glare there off the switch, but hopefully that's not too bad. Anyway, I'll try not to get in the way too much, but we'll see how it goes. I've already connected the plug here, the socket rather, to the lighting switch. The cable loom is not secured to the bike at the moment, it's just sort of laid in place. Let's start connecting up some wires, see what happens. Well, we know what will happen. Wires will get connected. Anyway, you know what I mean. So first things first, we're going to put the speedometer light connector on, and then there should be an earth lead, a fly lead from that coming through. So we'll connect that into the back of the wiring harness, main earthing point. I probably should have made it a bit longer. Already, look, finding problems, but it should be all right. In all fairness, if you make them too long, it's fine sort of to help you connect them up, but then when you come to put the headlamp back into the headlamp shell, if you've got too much wire, it can cause you problems. So let's use our pusher inners, as we used to call them, for pushing in the connectors. That's the blue going back down to the horn, so we need to connect the red and black, which is the horn connection. Let's push that through a little bit. Okay, that's that one. Now we need to connect up the blue and white, which is the center connection on the dip switch, the wiper, if you like. That gets connected into that red, which is coming out of the main lighting switch. And now all we've got to connect is the headlamp, because we've got the pilot lamp cable, we've got the dip and the main, and we've got the earth connections. So let's get those wired in. This hopefully is where I don't drop the headlamp on the floor. Because that would not be amusing. Well, not for me at least. Okay, that's one. Two. I can't remember which is which. Let me just consult my little list. Main is brown is dip, so blue is main. So the black lead on the headlamp is the earth lead. I need to push that in a little bit more with a screwdriver. What did I say? I can't remember already. Main is brown. No, sorry, main is blue. And that corresponds with white on the headlamp. White for height is the old rule. Hopefully you're seeing this. I'll get that in there. Oops, not quite on. There we go. Last but not least, the dip beam connection. Okay, and then we'll just kind of guide it in. Make some room for the headlamp. And I won't fasten the headlamp security screws just yet, because Well, that was a struggle. The headlamp is now fitted, but it's going to come off again because I want to have another look at these little glazing clips that hold the headlamp unit into the rim. I'm not entirely happy with the way they're fitting, and it looks as though there's been some damage to the rim at some point. It's slightly flattened in places, so that might need just teasing out a little bit just to get a slightly better fit, but not a problem. Everything's wired up at the moment, so it should work. Let's go down the other end and get the battery compartment sorted out. Right, we're at the other business end again. Here's our new wiring harness coming in, just loosely fed in there at the moment. We've got our cable coming through, our small wiring harness coming through from the regulator rectifier. This cable here is coming up from the engine. This is coming up from the stator plate to service the ignition and the charging wiring. So the first thing I think we'll do is put the horn loop, connect up the horn loop. So let's get these cables on. You'll notice I'm not tying anything up out of the way or cable tying anything at the moment. I'm just trying to get everything to sit naturally, and then we'll figure out where things need to go from there. Okay, there's our main earth. Let's get that in. Get out of the way. Okay, so we've got our main earth connected, and then our red cable, which will go here to our battery and regulator rectifier connector. If I can get it in, there we go. So far so good. Brown cable up with your connector. That's our stoplight. It looks a bit of a mess at the moment, but we can do some tidying up once we know everything works. Stoplight connected, and then the last cable that we have, which can go that way, is our tail light. There it is. Okay, so everything should be connected apart from our battery, of course. And I'll go and grab the battery now. We'll get that in, get it connected up, and we'll see if everything works. Right, the battery is in, and we've got a gap underneath it and this great big gap up here, which I'm going to have to do something about, make some sort of foam packing pieces or something like that. But no funny business, I just wanted you to be here when we did it. So this is our first connection. So we've got the positively connected. We're just going to connect the earth now. I'm just going to flash it across to make sure we don't get a huge spark. Nothing shorted, hopefully. Let's connect it up. And if we've been successful, we should have a full suite of electrics. At least as much as you get on a Bantam anyway, which will be a set of lights and a horn. Okay. But no dead shorts is always a win. Right. We can do a much tidier job of this wiring once we're done and dusted. At the moment I'm just going to leave it all hanging out just in case we've got any faults. If it's all tied up or restricted in any way, it could stop us from getting to any areas that we need to give attention to. So let me just move you. Oh, I have to get a bike ramp. Right, here we go then, live on camera. This is where you find out if I've messed it up or not, which hopefully I haven't. So the first thing we should have is a horn. So let's give it a go. We've got a horn. We should have a pilot light and a tail light and a speedo light. we have a pilot light, and I don't know if you can see the reflection on the garage door. You can just about see red on the garage door back there, so we have a tail light. And let's have a look at the speedo light. Yes, we have a speedo light. Stop light. So hopefully you can see that lighting up on the back wall there, on the door rather. Now we need a headlamp and a tail lamp, which we've got. We need a speedo lamp, which we've got. The stop lamp should still work, which it does. And then we should have a main dip beam. So we're on the dip beam at the moment, and we've got a main beam. Just check everything on the main beam. Yeah, we've still got a speedo lamp. Still got a tail lamp. So that's it. That's as much electrics as you get on a Bantam. Unless of course you want to start adding signal indicators or anything like that, which I'm not going to do that because that's what arms are for. But we've just got one last check to do. I'll set up for that now, and we'll get it checked. And if everything's good, we can get the fuel tank back on. Well, we'll get the wiring tidied up, get the fuel tank back on, and that's pretty much it for the wiring, I think. Right then, last little bit of the video, we're going to do a charging check, just to make sure that our electrical system is working as we expect it to. I've got the ammeter connected in series with the battery, so that when we put a load on, we will see a discharge on the ammeter. And I've got the voltmeter across as well, just across the battery, just for reference really. We know that our battery is pretty much fully charged. It's showing 12 volts or a slight shade under there, so probably could do with a refresher charge. But we just want to make sure that the alternator output, the regulator output rather, will cope with the discharge and will put a little bit of charge back into the battery. So let's put a load on. I'll just put the lights on. So there we go, we've got a discharge, and I'm going to start the engine up, and then I'll leave you guys to watch the ammeter, and I'll give it a couple of revs, and we should hopefully see a charge. So I'll go around the other side, get the engine running, let's see what happens. So I'll just go through the ritual starting the engine, put some fuel on, and give the carb a little tickle. Okay, there we go. Oh, nearly. So we had quite a good charge there, definitely an amp or a couple of amps or so. So we know that the regulator is working. It's putting a charge into the battery as well as coping with the drain. So I'm more than happy with that. I didn't rev the bike up too much because it's stone cold and it's still on the choke. So I don't want to go bananas with it. Okay, happy days. Right. I think that's us just about done. So there we go, lights, action and sound, our fully connected Bantam. A very simple system, but hopefully it was of interest to you, and maybe of use if you are making your own wiring harness. I think that's it for this video. I'm going to go in and do a little bit of tidying and just checking the cable runs and make sure everything is in good order, but that's pretty much all there is left to do. As ever, thanks very much indeed for watching. Thanks for clicking the like button, if you liked it, that is, and thanks to those of you who have subscribed. If you haven't, then please do. You'll be more than welcome. And until the next video, I will say mind how you go, and see you soon.